It was just a look, nothing dramatic, no words spoken, no sudden shift in the air. But something about the way he stared at me that day made my stomach drop like I'd missed a step on the stairs. We were sitting across from each other at our usual coffee shop, the one with the sticky wooden tables and the barista who always remembered how we liked our drinks. The place was noisy around us, people laughing, cups clinking, the low hum of conversation, but in that moment, it all faded out. All I could see was his face, his eyes, and the way they held mine, not with anger or sadness but with something else. Something I couldn't name. I remember thinking maybe he was tired. Maybe he was distracted by something going on in his life, something he hadn't told me yet. That's what I told myself anyway. Because the alternative, the idea that something had changed between us without me even noticing, felt too heavy to carry. So I smiled, I asked him if he was okay, and he blinked like he was waking up from a dream. He gave me that half smile he always did when he didn't want to talk about something, and said, "Yeah, I'm fine." Just like that. No explanation, no apology, just silence wrapped in a smile. But I couldn't shake it. That look stayed with me long after we left the cafe, long after we went our separate ways for the night. It played over and over in my head like a broken loop. Not angry, not hurt, just different, like he wasn't seeing me anymore. Like he was seeing someone else entirely, someone I didn't recognize. Someone I didn't know, and the worst part, I couldn't figure out why. Had I done something wrong? Said something I shouldn't have? Or worse, had he figured out something about me that I hadn't even admitted to myself yet? We'd been best friends for years. Since high school, actually. Back when the world still felt big and endless, and every weekend was a chance to escape whatever small-town boredom we were stuck in. We'd shared everything, secrets, dreams, fears, stupid jokes that only we found funny. I thought I knew him better than anyone. I thought he knew me too. But now, after that look, I wasn't so sure. Maybe it was because of what happened earlier that week. We'd been hanging out at his place, watching some dumb action movie neither of us really cared about. It was late, and we were both half asleep on the couch. At some point, he reached over and pulled the blanket over my shoulders without saying anything. I didn't think much of it. He always did stuff like that, small, thoughtful things that made me feel safe. But this time, I felt something else. A flicker of something unfamiliar. A warmth that wasn't just from the blanket. I turned to thank him, and he was already looking at me. Not just casually glancing over, really looking. Like he was trying to memorize my face. I laughed it off, nudged his shoulder, and said, "What?" But he didn't answer right away. He just shook his head and looked away. I told myself it was nothing. Just one of those weird moments friends have sometimes. But now, days later, I wasn't so sure. Because that look in the cafe, it reminded me of that moment. And maybe that's what scared me the most. I started replaying every interaction between us since then. Every text, every laugh, every time he touched my arm or leaned into me while we walked. Were they just normal friend things? Or had there always been something more hiding underneath? I hated how confused I felt. I hated how much it mattered. I was supposed to be able to read him like an open book. That's what best friends do. But now, it felt like he'd rewritten himself without telling me, and I was left trying to understand a language I barely recognized. I wanted to ask him what was going on. To demand answers. But I was afraid. Afraid of what he might say. Afraid of what I might say back. So instead, I let it sit inside me like a stone. Heavy. Unmovable. And every time I thought about it, I kept coming back to that same question. Who was he seeing when he looked at me like that? Because it didn't feel like me. It felt like someone else entirely. We were supposed to be forever. That's what we used to say, not in some cheesy, over-the-top way, but like it was just a fact of life. Like the sun rising in the morning or the stars showing up when it got dark. We were kids when we made that promise, maybe 12 or 13, sitting on the roof of his garage with 2 melted popsicles in our hands and the whole world stretched out in front of us. We talked about growing old together, getting jobs next to each other, buying houses close enough to walk to whenever we needed someone. Back then, forever meant something simple. It meant always having each other's backs. Always knowing who would pick up the phone first when things went wrong. And for years, that's exactly what happened. We shared everything. I mean everything asterisk. The good, the bad, the ugly. He knew when I was lying before I even opened my mouth. I could tell when he was holding something back just by the way he looked at me. We were more than friends, we were family. The kind you chose. The kind that stuck around even when the rest of the world didn't make sense anymore. I remember one night in high school when I completely broke down after a fight with my dad. I showed up at his house soaked from the rain, shaking like I'd been standing outside longer than I realized. He didn't ask questions. He just pulled me inside, wrapped me in a blanket, and sat with me on the floor while I cried like I couldn't stop. He held my hand the whole time, not saying much, just letting me know he wasn't going anywhere. That night, I felt safe in a way I hadn't in a long time. Not because he fixed anything, but because he stayed. There were so many moments like that. So many times when I thought, this is what real friendship feels like. No pretending, no masks, just raw, unfiltered honesty. We saw each other through breakups, failed exams, family drama, job losses, stupid mistakes that made us feel like we were falling apart. And every single time, we came out the other side stronger. Closer. We had this rhythm, this connection that no one else seemed to understand. People used to joke about how attached we were, how they couldn't tell if we were brothers or something more. We always laughed it off. Best friends, we'd say in unison, like it was some kind of secret code only we knew. But sometimes, late at night when we were alone, I'd catch him looking at me in a way that made my heart skip. Not often, just little glances, quick, almost invisible, and I'd wonder if I imagined them. But I never said anything. Because best friends don't look at each other like that. At least, that's what I told myself. That's what I believed. Until now. Because now, when I think back on all those years, all those moments, I start to see things differently. I start to notice the silences that lasted just a second too long. The times he reached for me without thinking. The way he smiled when I walked into a room, like I was the only person who mattered. I thought it was just affection. Just closeness. Just how we were. But what if it was something else? What if it was something neither of us wanted to name? There was this one night, senior year, right before graduation, when we ended up staying out way too late. We were drunk, laughing about nothing, walking barefoot through the park like we owned the place. At some point, he stopped and turned to me, eyes serious in a way they rarely were when he was drinking. He said, "Promise me we'll always be like this." I asked what he meant, and he just shook his head and smiled like he didn't know how to explain it. Just us. Always. I promised him. Of course I did. Because I meant it. I truly believed that nothing could ever come between us. Not time, not distance, not whatever life threw our way. We were forever. That's what I thought. But now, after that look in the cafe, I'm not so sure anymore. Because forever changes meaning when you start to feel something you can't explain. When you realize that maybe, just maybe, your best friend wasn't seeing you the same way you were seeing them. Or worse, that they were seeing something in you that you weren't ready to admit existed. And the scariest part, I don't know when it started. Was it always there, hiding beneath our jokes and late-night talks? Or did it grow slowly, like a seed planted in silence, waiting for the right moment to bloom? All I know is that the boy who once swore we'd be forever looked at me like I was a stranger. And I have no idea how to fix that. There was a night, like any other, or so I thought at the time, when everything inside me shifted without warning. We were at his place, just hanging out after a long week of school and work and whatever mess life had thrown at us that week. It was late, the kind of late where the world outside felt distant, muffled by the quiet hum of the TV and the soft glow of his bedroom lamp. We were lying on the floor, stretched out on the old blanket we'd stolen from his parents' attic years ago, our heads close enough that if either of us turned slightly, we could see each other's face. We weren't doing anything special. Just talking. About stupid things. About music, about people we knew, about what we thought our lives would look like 10 years from then. He was laughing, that deep, easy laugh of his that always made me feel like everything was going to be okay, even when it wasn't. And then, for no reason I can explain, I looked at him. Really looked at him. It wasn't the first time I'd noticed how he looked, not in some weird way, just, really seen him. Like, seen him. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The way his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned back too far. The way he always chewed the inside of his cheek when he was thinking hard about something. But that night, it hit me differently. There was something about the way he was looking at me, not intense, not dramatic, just, there, that made my chest tighten in a way I didn't understand. I tried to shake it off. Laughed at something he said, nudged his shoulder with mine, pretended like nothing had changed. But something had. Something deep inside me. Because for the first time in my life, I felt something for my best friend that didn't fit into the box I had built around our relationship. And I hated it. Not because I didn't care about him, I did. More than anyone else in the world. But this wasn't supposed to happen. Best friends don't feel like this. Not toward each other. Not like this. So I buried it. Fast. Hard. I told myself it was just exhaustion. Or hormones. Or maybe I was just lonely. Anything but what it really was. But it didn't go away. It came back again and again, in little ways that I couldn't ignore. When he hugged me too tight after a bad day. When he reached for my hand without thinking while we crossed a busy street. When he whispered, "You're going to be okay," and I believed him more than I believed anything else in the world. Each time, I pushed the feeling down deeper, pretending it wasn't there. Telling myself that if I ignored it long enough, it would disappear. That if I didn't say it out loud, it wouldn't be real. But the truth is, once you feel something, really feel it, you can't unfeel it. You can pretend. You can distract yourself. You can build walls so high they touch the sky. But the feeling stays. Quietly. Patiently. Waiting for the moment you finally stop running. And that moment came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, we were walking home from class, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows behind us. We were talking about relationships, not ours, obviously, but other people's. He asked me if I'd ever been in love. I hesitated before answering, which was strange because I never hesitated with him. I told him I didn't know. That maybe I had, but it hadn't felt like what people described. He nodded, thoughtful, and then said, "Sometimes love doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it just fits." I remember staring at him, heart suddenly pounding for no reason I could explain. I wanted to ask him what he meant, who he was talking about, if he was talking about someone in particular. But I didn't. I just swallowed hard and changed the subject. Later that night, I lay awake in bed, replaying every word he'd said. Every glance, every touch, every time he smiled at me like I was something worth holding onto. And for the first time, I let myself think the thing I had been afraid to admit. What if I was falling for my best friend? The realization scared me more than I can explain. Not just because of what it meant, but because of what it could cost me. Our friendship, our entire world, everything we had built together. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know if I ever would be. So I did what I always did when something got too big to handle. I ran. Not literally, just emotionally. I started keeping my distance, not in an obvious way, but in subtle ones. Fewer texts, shorter conversations, less eye contact, anything to keep the feelings from growing stronger. But no matter how much I tried to push them away, they kept coming back. Louder each time, more persistent, like a song stuck on repeat in my head, playing over and over until I had no choice but to listen. And the worst part, I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Not my sister, not my other friends, definitely not him. Because how do you tell someone you've known your whole life that you might be in love with them, and that you're terrified of losing them because of it? You don't. You carry it alone, in silence, until it becomes heavier than you can bear. Until one day, you realize that hiding who you are, even from the person you trust most, is its own kind of loneliness. And that's when the real fear begins. Not that he won't love you back, but that once he sees the truth, he'll walk away forever. There were days when I thought I could live with the secret. Days when I convinced myself that if I just kept my head down, stayed quiet, and played it cool, everything would go back to normal. That the feeling inside me, the one that whispered his name every time he smiled at me, every time he touched my arm without thinking, every time he said, "I've got you," like he meant it more than just as a friend, would fade. That it was just a phase. A mistake. Something temporary. But secrets don't work like that. Not real ones. The kind that sit in your chest like a stone and press down until breathing feels harder than usual. I tried so hard to pretend like nothing had changed. Like I wasn't suddenly aware of him in a way I never had been before. Like I didn't catch myself watching him when he wasn't looking. Like I didn't feel something shift inside me every time he said my name. But no matter how much I lied to myself, the truth kept clawing its way out. It started showing up in small ways, things I couldn't explain or control. Like the way my heart would race when he walked into a room. Or how I'd find myself staring at him during conversations, not hearing a word he was saying because I was too busy trying to memorize the way his mouth moved when he talked. Or how I'd get jealous, actual, stupid jealousy, whenever he mentioned another guy he liked. Not in a romantic way, just someone he thought was cool or funny or easy to talk to. And I hated that feeling. Hated how weak it made me feel. How selfish. How wrong. Because what kind of person falls for their best friend and then gets mad when they're happy? What kind of person keeps that kind of truth locked inside while pretending to be okay with everything else? The kind of person who's scared. That's who. And I was terrified. Not just of losing him, though that fear was always there, lurking in the back of my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake, but of what it meant about me. About who I was. Because this wasn't just about liking someone I wasn't supposed to. This was about realizing that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't who I thought I was. I had never questioned it before. Never really thought about it. I had crushes on girls. I dated. I laughed at the same jokes everyone else did. I lived inside the lines everyone else drew. But now, standing outside of that neat little box I used to fit in so easily, I felt like I was unraveling piece by piece. Was I gay? Was this just a fluke? Was it something temporary, or was this the start of something bigger that I hadn't even begun to understand yet? I didn't know, and not knowing scared me more than anything else. So I buried it deeper. I built walls around it. I told myself that this was just confusion, that I was overthinking, that I needed to focus on other things, school, work, anything that would distract me from the mess inside my head. But distraction only works for so long, because the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. It showed up in dreams I couldn't control, in moments of silence where I imagined what it would feel like to kiss him, to hold his hand, to tell him everything and see if he looked at me the same way or if something in his eyes would change forever. I wanted to say it. So many times, I almost did. When we were alone, when the world felt still enough to hold the weight of what I was carrying. But every time, I stopped myself. Because what if he didn't feel the same? What if he looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize anymore? What if he pulled away and left me alone with this truth I couldn't escape? I couldn't risk that. So instead, I smiled when I wanted to cry, laughed when I wanted to scream, acted like everything was fine when I was falling apart inside. And worst of all, I started lying to him. Not big lies, just little ones, ones that added up, like saying I was tired when he asked if I wanted to hang out, or brushing off his questions when he noticed I seemed distracted, or avoiding his gaze when I knew he was looking at me in that way again, the one that made my chest ache. He didn't push, he never did. He respected my space, even when I didn't deserve it, even when I was being unfair, and that made me feel worse. Because he was being the best friend I needed, while I was being the one who couldn't be honest, not with him, not with anyone. I remember one night when we were sitting on his bed, scrolling through some dumb YouTube videos neither of us really cared about. It was late, and we were both half asleep, the kind of tired that makes you forget to guard your emotions. At some point, he turned to me and said, "You seem different lately." I froze. My heart dropped into my stomach like I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't have. "Different how?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He shrugged. "I don't know. Just quieter, distracted." I forced a laugh. "Maybe I'm just tired." He studied me for a moment, like he was trying to see past whatever mask I was wearing. Then he nodded, like he was letting it go. But I saw it in his eyes, the worry, the curiosity, maybe even the suspicion, and that was the closest we ever came to talking about it. Until now. Because now, after everything, I can't stop thinking about that moment. About how close he was to seeing the truth. About how close I was to telling him. And I wonder if he already knew. If he had seen the way I looked at him sometimes. If he had noticed the way my voice changed when I was nervous around him. If he had picked up on the things I tried so hard to hide. Maybe he did. Maybe he just didn't say anything because he was afraid to. Afraid of what it would mean. Afraid of what it would change. Because I was afraid too. Still am. But the thing about secrets is that they don't stay hidden forever. No matter how hard you try to bury them, they always find a way to surface. And when they do, there's no going back. There was a moment, just one, but it felt like an eternity, when I realized he knew. Not everything, maybe not even half of it, but enough. Enough to change the way I looked at him forever. It wasn't dramatic. No confession, no big reveal, no music swelling in the background. Just a question. A simple, quiet question that hit me harder than anything else ever had. We were sitting outside his apartment, on the little concrete ledge where we always ended up after long nights out or lazy afternoons doing nothing. The sky was dark, stars scattered across it like someone had spilled glitter into the night. He was leaning back on his hands, looking up at the sky like he was trying to find something in it. I was fidgeting with my phone, pretending to check messages I didn't care about. We'd been talking about random stuff, stupid memes, our dumb high school teachers, how neither of us could cook to save our lives. When he suddenly said, "Have you ever liked someone you weren't supposed to?" I froze. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything inside me. My fingers tightened around my phone. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. And for a second, I couldn't think of anything to say. He didn't look at me. Just kept staring at the sky like he hadn't just asked something that completely changed the air between us. "Why are you asking that?" I finally managed, voice lower than I meant it to be. He shrugged. "Just wondering." But it wasn't just wondering. Nothing about the way he said it felt casual. There was something underneath it, something heavy. Something unsaid. I wanted to laugh it off. Make a joke. Change the subject. That's what I always did when things got too close to the truth. But this time, I couldn't. Because I knew. He knew. Somehow, he knew asterisk. Not all of it, maybe not even most of it, but enough to make my stomach twist into knots. Enough to make me feel like I was standing naked in front of him, exposed in a way I never wanted to be. And instead of anger, or confusion, or disappointment, there was understanding in his eyes. That scared me more than anything else. Because if he understood, that meant he'd been thinking about this too. That he'd noticed things. That he'd seen the way I looked at him sometimes. The way I hesitated before touching him. The way my voice changed when I was nervous. All the tiny, invisible signs I thought I had hidden so well. I wanted to ask him what he meant. If he was talking about himself. If he was trying to tell me something without actually saying it. But I couldn't get the words out. My mouth felt dry. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. So I just stared at him, waiting for him to say more. But he didn't. Instead, he let out a small, almost bitter laugh and shook his head like he was trying to erase whatever had just passed between us. Then he turned to me and smiled, that same smile he always gave when he didn't want to talk about something. That smile that told me he was letting it go, even if he didn't really want to. "Forget it," he said. "It's stupid." But it wasn't stupid. It was everything. And from that moment on, nothing felt the same. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Like how sometimes, when we were alone, he would watch me longer than usual. How he seemed to hesitate before touching me, like he was deciding whether it was okay. How his voice softened when he talked to me late at night, like he was speaking to someone fragile. I used to think those were just normal things friends did. Casual touches, shared silences, comfortable closeness. Now, I wasn't so sure. I began replaying every interaction between us, searching for clues I might have missed. Every time he brushed my arm while laughing. Every time he leaned into me while we walked. Every time he stayed up late just to listen when I needed someone. Had they all meant something? Had he known all along? And if he did, why hadn't he said anything? Was he afraid? Was he waiting for me to speak first? Or worse, was he trying to protect me from something? Because now, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About him asterisk. About us asterisk. About what we were and what we could have been if I hadn't spent so long burying my feelings under layers of denial and fear. I wanted to confront him. To ask him what he meant. To demand answers. But every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck. Because what if I was wrong? What if I was reading too much into it? What if I ruined everything by saying something I couldn't take back? So I stayed silent. I watched him. Waited for another sign. Another clue. Another question disguised as nothing. But he didn't ask again. Instead, he acted like it had never happened. Like that single sentence hadn't cracked open something inside me that I couldn't put back together. And that was worse than anything. Because silence is louder than words when you're both carrying the same secret. And now, I was certain, we both were. But neither of us was ready to say it out loud. Neither of us was ready to face what it meant. And so, we kept pretending. Even though pretending hurt more than the truth ever could. There was a moment, just one, but it felt like the entire world stopped turning. We were walking home from his place after another night of pretending everything was fine. The streetlights flickered on as the sky darkened around us, casting long shadows that stretched across the sidewalk like silent witnesses to something neither of us could say out loud. It was quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat if you listen hard enough. And I was listening. Hard. We had been talking, sort of, about nothing important. Just the usual stuff. Music we liked. People we missed. How fast time seemed to move when you weren't paying attention. But there was something different in the way he spoke that night. Something slower. More deliberate. Like every word was being weighed before it left his mouth. And then, for no reason I could explain, we both slowed our pace. Like some invisible force had told us not to rush this part. We walked side by side, close enough that our arms almost touched with every step. Close enough that I could smell his shampoo. That familiar scent that always made me feel weirdly safe and strangely nervous at the same time. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. He was looking down at the ground, lips pressed into a thin line. Not frowning exactly, but not smiling either. Just thinking. And I knew that look. I'd seen it 1,000 times before. That look meant he was carrying something heavy inside him. Something he wasn't sure how to let go of. I wanted to ask him what was wrong. I wanted to stop walking and turn to face him and say, "Talk to me." But I didn't. Because I already knew what he was thinking about. Or at least, I thought I did. It was going to be the moment. The moment we finally said it out loud. The moment everything changed. Because I could feel it coming. That pressure in the air, like a storm building just beneath the surface of our silence. Every step we took felt heavier than the last. Like we were both waiting for someone to speak first. To break the tension. To say the thing we'd been holding onto for so long. And then he stopped. Walking. Right there, in the middle of the sidewalk, under a flickering streetlight that buzzed softly above us. He turned to me slowly, like he was afraid of what would happen if he moved too fast. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he really looked at me. Not like a best friend. Not like someone who had known me since we were kids. But like someone who saw me. All of me. Even the parts one tried to hide. His mouth opened slightly, like he was about to say something. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I held my breath without realizing it. This was it. He was going to say it. Whatever it was. And then, he closed his mouth, shook his head, smiled that half smile of his, the one he used when he didn't want to talk about something. I'm being stupid, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to physically erase whatever he had been about to say. I blinked. What? Nothing, he said quickly, starting to walk again. Forget it. But I couldn't forget it. Because I had seen it in his eyes. That flicker of something real. Something raw. Something we both understood but neither of us had the courage to name. I followed him silently, my mind racing. What had he been about to say? Was it about me? About us? Had he been about to admit what I had been trying so hard to ignore? Or worse, had he been about to tell me that he didn't feel the same way? That thought hit harder than I expected. I wanted to ask him. To stop him again and demand answers. But I couldn't. Because what if he said no? What if he laughed it off and told me I was imagining things? What if he looked at me like I had just ruined everything between us? So instead, I swallowed the words. Let them sit in my throat like a lump I couldn't swallow. And I kept walking. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just stood inches away from the truth. Like I hadn't come closer to saying the words I had carried for so long than I ever had before. We talked again after that, but it was different. Lighter. Forced. The kind of conversation people have when they're both thinking about something else entirely. We laughed at the same jokes, nodded at the same stories, acted like we were just two friends having a normal night. But nothing about that moment had been normal. It was the closest we had ever come to breaking the silence. And yet, somehow, it still remained. Unspoken, untouched, hanging between us like a ghost we both refused to acknowledge. Later that night, lying awake in bed, I replayed the whole thing over and over in my head. Every second, every glance, every hesitation, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized something terrifying. He had been about to say something. And he had stopped himself. Which meant he knew asterisk. He knew what I was feeling. Or at least, he suspected. And he had chosen not to say it. Why? Was he scared? Was he confused? Did he not feel the same way? Or worse, did he feel it too, but didn't know how to handle it? I didn't know. And that uncertainty ate at me more than anything else. Because now, I wasn't just carrying my own secret anymore. I was carrying his too. And I had no idea what to do with either of them. All I knew was that we had stood on the edge of saying everything. And we had both stepped back. Because sometimes, silence says the most. Even when you're screaming inside. We stopped talking about it. Not because we had made a decision, but because we didn't know how to make one at all. After that night, the one where he almost spoke and I almost listened, things shifted between us in ways neither of us could explain. It wasn't dramatic. No big fight. No sudden distance. Just, something changed. A quiet tension settled over everything we did together, like we were both walking on eggshells around each other, afraid of stepping too close to the edge again. He still laughed at my dumb jokes. Still showed up with my favorite snacks when he knew I was having a rough day. Still leaned into me when we sat side by side watching movies like nothing had ever been different. But there was something else now, too. A hesitation in his touch. A pause before his smile reached his eyes. A look sometimes, just a flicker, that said more than words ever could. And I hated it. Not because I wanted him to say something. Not because I wanted to force this thing between us into the open. But because I couldn't tell if he was pulling away or holding on. And I didn't know what scared me more. Because the truth was, I was stuck. Trapped between two versions of myself, the one who needed him as my best friend, and the one who wanted something more. And no matter which way I turned, I felt like I was risking everything. What if I told him? What if I finally said the words I had carried for so long? I think I'm falling for you, and he looked at me like I had just broken something sacred. What if he didn't feel the same? What if he laughed it off like it was some kind of joke? Or worse, what if he took a step back and slowly started disappearing from my life altogether? Because that was the real fear, wasn't it? Not rejection, not embarrassment, not even shame. It was losing him. Forever had always meant something solid between us. Something unbreakable. But now, I wasn't sure what forever meant anymore. And then there was the other side of the coin, the possibility that he did feel something too. That he had been feeling it for a while. That every glance, every hesitation, every moment we almost spoke, they weren't just coincidences. And if that was true, then why hadn't he said anything? Was he waiting for me? Was he afraid? Did he think I didn't want to hear it? Or did he already know I felt the same, and was terrified of what that meant? Because here's the thing about love, real love, the kind that shakes your world, it doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't give you a clear path forward. It just shows up, messy and complicated, and asks you to choose. And sometimes, choosing feels like standing on a cliff with no net below. I thought about telling him so many times. Late at night, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was doing the same. In the moments between texts, when I typed out a message and then deleted it before sending. When he would show up at my door with a six-pack and a movie and sit beside me like nothing had changed, like we weren't both carrying the weight of something neither of us could name. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, what he was feeling, if he saw me the way I saw him now, not just as a friend, but as someone he could imagine loving. But every time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck. Because what if I said them and he walked away? Or worse, what if he stayed, and we tried, and it failed? Because that was the biggest fear of all. That if we crossed this line, if we let ourselves fall into whatever this was, and it didn't work out, we wouldn't just lose whatever this was asterisk. We'd lose everything. The late night talks, the inside jokes, the comfort of knowing someone would always be there, no matter what. The safety of our friendship, the thing that had kept me grounded through every storm in my life, would be gone. And I didn't know if I could survive that. So I stayed silent. And he did too. We kept pretending, kept smiling, kept laughing, kept touching in small, careful ways that meant more than they should have. But underneath it all, the question remained. What are we willing to risk for something we're both too afraid to name? Asterisk. And the answer scared me more than I could say. Because love shouldn't feel like this. It shouldn't feel like walking on glass, hoping not to fall. It shouldn't feel like a secret you carry alone. It shouldn't feel like a choice between keeping someone close and losing them completely. Love should feel like freedom. But right now, it felt like prison. And I didn't know how to escape. Not without breaking something. Not without losing something. Not without losing him asterisk. So I stayed where I was, caught between wanting him and needing him. Between saying everything and staying silent. Between the boy who once swore we'd be forever and the man I was starting to realize I might be in love with. And I didn't know how to fix that. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know how to let go. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living like this, caught in the space between friendship and something more, trapped in a silence that was growing heavier with every passing day. Something had to change, but I didn't know what. And I didn't know who would be the one to say it first. If either of us ever did, eventually, the silence broke. It wasn't dramatic. No grand moment. No music swelling in the background. No rain falling as we stood under a street lamp like something out of a movie. Just two people, sitting on his couch, surrounded by the quiet hum of everyday life, the soft buzz of the TV, the occasional sound of a car passing outside, the way our breathing settled into the same rhythm without either of us realizing it. We had been talking about nothing important. Or so I thought at first. He was asking questions I didn't expect, ones that felt heavier than they should have. Not about relationships or love or anything that sounded like it might lead to that conversation. Just small things, like what I thought happiness looked like. If I believed in soulmates. If I ever imagined myself with someone who truly understood me. I answered casually at first, giving the kinds of responses you give when you don't want to reveal too much. But then he asked one more. Do you think two people can love each other without knowing how to say it? And something inside me shifted. I turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw it, everything he hadn't said out loud. All the hesitation, all the fear, all the times he had almost spoken and stopped himself. It was all there, written across his face like an open book I had spent too long pretending not to read. My heart started pounding, because I knew, he knew. And finally, neither of us was going to run from it anymore. I think, I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper, some people spend their whole lives trying to find the right words. He nodded, eyes locked onto mine. And then, without looking away, he took a breath, deep, shaky, and said the thing I had waited so long to hear. I think I've been in love with you for longer than I wanted to admit. The words hit me like a wave. A rush of air leaving my lungs. A warmth spreading through my chest. And then, just as fast, a flood of emotions I couldn't name, relief, fear, joy, terror, disbelief, hope. Everything I had carried alone for so long, every secret, every question, every silent longing, suddenly had weight. Had shape, had meaning, because he felt it too. And now, there was no going back. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath, trying to make sense of the storm inside me. And then I said it, the words I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times but never thought I would actually speak. I think I'm in love with you too. The second the words left my mouth, something changed between us. Not instantly, not dramatically, but it was there, a shift in the air, a release of tension that had been building for years. We both sat there, staring at each other, like we were waiting for the world to react. Waiting for something to happen. But nothing did, except everything. Because now, we both knew. Now, there were no more secrets. No more silences filled with unspoken truths. No more pretending. Just us. Two best friends who had somehow become something more. Not because we planned it. Not because we chose it. But because it happened anyway. And once it was out in the open, everything else became easier, and harder, all at once. We talked. For hours. About everything. About when it started. About all the moments we had missed. About how scared we had both been. About what this meant for us now. About whether we could still be friends if things didn't work out. About whether we even wanted to go back to being just friends, knowing what we now knew. There were tears. Not sadness, just release. The kind that comes when you carry something heavy for so long and finally let it go. And there were laughs too. Because even in the middle of something so raw, so real, we were still us asterisk. Still the two people who had grown up together. Who had shared every part of their lives. Who had always known how to make each other feel safe, even when the rest of the world didn't make sense. But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't some fairy tale ending where everything suddenly made sense and we lived happily ever after. Because real life doesn't work like that. We faced challenges. Hard ones. Some from within ourselves. Some from the world around us. There were days when we questioned everything. When the fear crept back in. When we wondered if we were making a mistake. When we struggled to figure out who we were now, not just to each other, but to ourselves. But through it all, we stayed. Not because it was easy. Not because we had all the answers. But because we had chosen honesty. Chosen to stop hiding. Chosen to see each other, really see each other, even when it was hard. And that made all the difference. Because sometimes, love doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes, it just fits. Like pieces of a puzzle that were always meant to be together, even if it took a while to realize it. And in the end, that's what we found. Not perfection, not certainty, but something real, something worth holding onto. So if you're watching this and you recognize yourself in this story, if you've ever looked at someone and wondered what might happen if you just said the truth, know that you're not alone. Know that it's okay to be afraid. Know that it's okay to take your time. Know that it's okay to feel something you don't yet understand. And most importantly, know that if you do decide to speak, to share your truth, to step forward even when you're scared, there is beauty on the other side. So if this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own, leave a comment below. Let's talk. Let's support each other. Because sometimes, just knowing someone else understands is enough to give you the courage to take the next step. Thank you for listening.